It all started with a bang, or rather a whimper. The Wi-Fi was down and young Master Payne had been forced to spend the morning watching educational videos instead of playing online games. A fate worse than a dungeon full of goblins, I hear. His father, Skeptic, was grumbling about contacting pest control, as one does on a Tuesday morning. Meanwhile, his wife, Shadowcat, was attempting to untangle the laundry situation. Their two cats, Salem and Cleo, lay regally nearby, while Cleo's sister, Minx, chased a rogue thread around the room. All in all, a typical morning at the Smith household, until, of course, the entire living room vanished, replaced by a dense, sun-dappled forest teeming with giant mushrooms, chittering critters, and more vines than any botanical garden. If Skeptic's jaw had any more angles, he'd have cut himself shaving that morning. This has to be a dream, he muttered, rubbing his eyes. But his reflection in a nearby puddle showed no sign of slumber. Instead, a translucent blue screen hung in front of him, glowing softly. Name, Skeptic class, battle mage abilities, weapons, battle magic, transmutation level, 1 HP, 100, 100th MP, 50/50ths. He blinked, startled. The same went for Shadowcat, whose screen revealed her as a nature witch with a smattering of other skills. Their 3 kids also sprouted screens, albeit with simpler stats and the intriguing note that their classes would manifest at puberty. Well, that's reassuring, Skeptic muttered, eyeing Payne's current grumbling stat, which already felt maxed. Their first challenge: finding food that didn't glow, move, or try to eat them back. Shadowcat, bless her sensible heart, immediately put her herb lore to good use, identifying edible berries, while me, the one-eyed veteran, sniffed out a hidden spring. Skeptic, meanwhile, attempted his first transmutation. He eyed a particularly unappetizing rock. Right, transmutation. Let's try turning this into a pizza. The rock glowed, shimmered, and then solidified into a slightly smaller, still unappetizing, and now faintly cheese-smelling rock. Close enough, he sighed, wiping sweat from his brow as his MP dipped alarmingly. Fortunately, their feline companions were far more adept at hunting. After a tense standoff with a pack of snarling wolves, which involved Cleo casually strolling through them to catch a fish, and a lot of yelling from Skeptic, they settled down for a meal of fish and berries. And, yes, Skeptic eventually transmuted a stick into a fork. Told you it would come in handy. Next came a grumpkin, essentially a giant, perpetually disgruntled pumpkin with legs and surprisingly sharp teeth. It shambled towards them, emitting low, rumbling growls like a very annoyed indigestion. Everyone, calm down, Skeptic yelled, brandishing a sturdy branch he'd acquired. I'm a battle mage. Behold! He then attempted a fireball. A small, rather pathetic spark dribbled from his fingertips and quickly fizzled. Needs work, he conceded, looking slightly embarrassed. Shadowcat, however, had already knelt down, her lips moving silently. A moment later, a family of rather startled forest squirrels, clearly encouraged by her animal language, began pelting the Grumpkin with surprisingly accurate acorns. Max, the boisterous cat, seeing the general commotion, launched himself at the Grumpkin's leg, clinging on like a furry, furious limpet. The Grumpkin, annoyed more than harmed, started to wobble precariously. "Now," Skeptic Shadowcat yelled. Taking his cue, Skeptic bellowed, "Transmute," and aimed at the ground beneath the wobbling Grumpkin. The patch of earth instantly turned into a pit of sticky, knee-deep mud, sending the Grumpkin face first into the bog with a satisfying squelch. Pain, Tank, and Screech, who had been hiding behind a large tree, erupted into cheers. "Dad finally did something useful," shouted Pain, earning him a stern parental glare. The cats were surprisingly invaluable. Minx, the mischievous one, once distracted a lumbering, furry dire bear by batting playfully at its nose before zipping away, leaving the confused beast to stumble over its own feet. Salem, with his majestic floof, had an uncanny ability to intimidate lesser creatures just by glaring. Cleo, meanwhile, had an elegant way of finding edible and non-toxic mushrooms, and seemed to possess an almost preternatural sense for avoiding actual danger, always leading them away from lurking threats with a casual flick of her tail. As the days turned into weeks, the family slowly adapted. Pain still complained about everything, but his agility-fleeing stat had mysteriously risen, and he could now scale trees with surprising speed. Tank's tactical resource-gathering stat was off the charts, having found more useful items than Skeptic's unreliable transmutation. Screech, whose imagination monster spotting was now at level 5, could point out dangers and non-dangers he'd invented from a mile away, and Skeptic, the reluctant battle mage, was slowly coming into his class. Under Shadowcat's patient guidance, he learned to conserve MP, aim for weak points, and, most importantly, exploit enemy weaknesses. One such creature was the Grumbled Grub, a subterranean worm-like monstrosity with an insatiable appetite for all things shiny. Thanks to Cleo's keen eyesight, the family spotted its telltale tunnel markings and set a trap using Minx's collection of sparkly gnome trinkets. When the Grumbled Grub lunged, entranced by the glittering bait, Skeptic transmuted a conveniently placed bucket of water into a thick slab of steel, trapping the creature inside. "See, teamwork," Shadowcat said with a smile, patting Skeptic awkwardly on the shoulder. "Exploiting weaknesses, remembering your objectives, utilizing the terrain, conserving resources." Skeptic sighed inwardly, already mentally listing all the ways she was wrong. But he had to admit, the plan had worked brilliantly. Their big breakthrough came when they stumbled upon a hidden village of gnomes. These tiny, bearded folk, initially wary of the giant surface dwellers, were quickly won over by Shadowcat's gentle nature and her ability to heal their ailing crops with her enchanting skill. Skeptic, meanwhile, used his battle magic, which was slowly improving beyond mere sparks, to help them clear a nearby cave of particularly nasty, if dim-witted, goblins. "All right, Skeptic, hit the big one," Shadowcat yelled from behind a mushroom. Healing a wounded gnome, Skeptic, now able to conjure a respectable, if slightly unstable, bolt of fire, yelled fireball, and missed the goblin completely. instead incinerating a very surprised and fortunately uninhabited strategic Miss Skeptic declared, as the goblin, startled by the sudden flash, stumbled into a tripwire laid by Tank earlier. Max then bounded forward, swiping at its ankles, causing it to fall. Payne, seeing his chance, picked up a convenient rock and hurled it, accidentally hitting the goblin squarely on the head. Even Screech, cowering behind Skeptic, managed to trip a fleeing goblin with a well-aimed, purely accidental kick from his suddenly high dexterity. Panic-induced stat, the gnomes, accustomed to much more elegant combat, were utterly bewildered but grateful. They offered the family shelter and taught them the ropes of their new world. Shadowcat's herb lore allowed her to whip up surprisingly potent potions, and her animal language even let her communicate with the gnome's pet giant beetles, much to Skeptic's bewilderment. "They have quite strong opinions about turnip stew," she'd inform him gravely. "Over time, they became part of the community." Skeptic even helped design a more efficient water system, complete with enchanted pipes to prevent leakage, a skill he'd picked up from Tank's relentless tinkering. Meanwhile, Shadowcat's healing proved invaluable during the annual Grumpkin migration, where angry pumpkins stampeded through the forest, scattering seeds of misery and gloom wherever they went. Life was still a struggle. Skeptic still occasionally tried to transmute a twig into a fully loaded smartphone and ended up with a slightly shinier twig. Shadowcat still had to mend Payne's pants after his latest agility fleeing stunt through thorny bushes, and Minx still delighted in stealing shiny gnome trinkets, only to return